Mr. President, distinguished world leaders, I stand before you not just as a man from Burkina Faso, but as the voice of a continent that is awakening. We've heard many promises of a green future, of investments celebrated under the banner of net zero. We've seen figures like Mr. Mark Carney hailed as architects of a sustainable world. But I must ask, sustainable for whom? Green for whom? And who truly reaps the benefits of this so-called progress? In the villages of Burkina Faso, my people do not see new solar panels for their homes. They see no electricity for their schools, no power for their hospitals. Instead, they see vast power plants that serve only the mines of gold and uranium, quietly feeding foreign corporations. They call this climate aid. I call it modern chain written in green ink. While the world cheers for net zero, Western banks within these alliances continue to pour billions into oil, gas, and coal. They say one thing, yet their actions tell a different story. And when the money flows back to London and New York, only crumbs are left for our continent. Mr. Carney, I must be plain. Your net zero is not light for Africa. It is net profit for corporations. But let it be known, we are no longer silent Africa. We have learned from Thomas Sankara that a people who accept to live on their knees will die on their knees. And I declare today, before the United Nations, that Africa will not sign another contract that sells away its future. We do not need beautiful promises on white paper. We need electricity in every home. We need true climate justice, and we need a fair global order. If the world truly wants sustainable development, then it must begin by returning to Africa the right to control its own resources. The story of this awakening begins on a late August day in 2025. Mark Carney unveiled a pledge to bring billions of dollars into Africa's green transition, and the announcement was celebrated across international headlines. For a nation like Burkina Faso, often overlooked on the global stage, the promise seemed like a rare moment of recognition. Carney's coalition of banks and investment funds declared that this money would deliver renewable energy projects, from solar farms to rural electrification. In the small villages of Burkina Faso, families allowed themselves to dream of a future where their children could study under electric light, where clinics would no longer struggle without power, and where clean energy could replace the burning of wood and charcoal. But when the engineers and contractors finally arrived, a very different reality began to take shape. The solar arrays were not built near schools or villages. The transmission lines did not extend into rural communities. Instead, the new infrastructure concentrated its power directly into the mining corridors, feeding the massive operations of foreign corporations extracting our gold and uranium. Ordinary citizens remained in darkness, watching as the promised green future illuminated only the factories of outsiders. It didn't take long for questions to spread. Was net zero truly about saving the planet, or was it about securing profit under the guise of climate aid? Critics inside Burkina Faso began to call it a performance stage for Wall Street, not a solution for Africa. Even some foreign observers admitted that the money circled back to Western investors, leaving little behind for the people who were supposed to benefit. In one of his early speeches on this issue, President Ibrahim Traoré gave words to this growing frustration. Standing before his citizens, he declared, "Net zero calculated in London means net darkness for our villages." It was a powerful sentence that resonated not just across Burkina Faso, but throughout the entire continent, an indictment of a system that promised hope while delivering dependence. Green ink and modern chains. This was only the beginning of a deeper revelation, one that would soon expose how sovereignty itself was being bargained away under the banner of climate finance. The fine print of the contracts told a very different story from the headlines. In order for Burkina Faso to access the promised climate funds, the nation had to agree to open its mines of gold, uranium, and other strategic resources to foreign corporations. What had been introduced as a partnership for sustainability now looked like a one-sided bargain where sovereignty itself became the price of entry. President Ibrahim Traoré did not hesitate to expose the truth. In a speech that electrified his supporters, he declared, "These are not investments in our future. They are modern chains written in green ink." His words cut sharply, evoking memories of earlier colonial agreements where African land and labor were signed away under the promise of progress.
The reaction inside Burkina Faso was immediate. Students filled university halls with debates about national dignity. Workers in mining towns began to voice their anger, saying the resources of their land were once again being handed to outsiders. In the capital, Ouagadougou, banners appeared across the streets reading, "Light for the people, not for corporations." The atmosphere grew heated. For many, this was not only about energy or climate policy, it was about whether Burkina Faso had the right to stand independently in a world still dominated by financial giants. By framing the issue as a question of sovereignty, Traoré transformed what had seemed like a technical policy debate into a rallying cry for freedom.
The global reaction and a new narrative. The international stage did not remain silent. In London, New York, and Brussels, financial elites defended Carney, praising him as the man who could align global capital with climate goals. Western media repeated the narrative that green finance was the only path forward, and they portrayed Traoré as reckless, a young leader risking his nation's stability by rejecting international support. But beyond the West, a different picture emerged. Russian and Chinese media quickly seized the moment, presenting Traoré as a bold voice resisting Western domination. They framed Burkina Faso as a symbol of the global South's struggle for fairness, an example of a country that refused to be treated as a laboratory for foreign experiments. Even in the United States, the response was divided. Policymakers in Washington, wary of losing influence in Africa, dismissed Traoré's rhetoric as anti-investment. Yet within American universities and community organizations, especially among African-American scholars and activists, Traoré's speech resonated deeply. Forums were held and op-eds were written, and his words, "We need light in every African home," were quoted as a rallying demand for real justice, not symbolic gestures. The emotional climax came when Traoré stood at the podium of the United Nations itself, with diplomats from every continent watching. He did not temper his language. "We do not need promises," he declared firmly. "We need power in every African home." The hall fell silent, and for a moment the weight of truth hung heavier than the polished speeches that had preceded him. It was no longer just about Burkina Faso. It was about the moral credibility of the entire Net Zero project. From defiance to self-determination, the revelations surrounding Carney's climate contracts lit a fire of public debate inside Burkina Faso that refused to be extinguished. In the markets of Ouagadougou, merchants spoke with bitterness. "They promised us light, but we are still in darkness. The only light shines on the mines." In rural villages where people still relied on kerosene lamps, elders asked why the wealth of their soil was flowing outward while their children studied under candlelight. President Ibrahim Traoré became a focal point of this frustration, not as its target, but as its champion. By calling out the hidden terms of the agreements, he positioned himself as a leader defending the dignity of ordinary citizens. In schools and universities, students painted murals of Traoré alongside Thomas Sankara, reviving the memory of past revolutionary ideals. For the young generation, he was no longer just a president. He was a symbol of resistance against manipulation dressed as aid. The political effect was profound. Civil society organizations began organizing local energy cooperatives, aiming to build solar projects with homegrown resources rather than waiting for foreign promises. The phrase "Burkina lights itself" became a motto, circulating on posters, radios, and street graffiti. Far from destabilizing the nation, Traoré's stance against Carney had reawakened a spirit of self-determination. Burkina Faso, once viewed as a small player in global affairs, was beginning to feel like the heartbeat of a larger African movement.